Hello, everyone. Stacey James here with Pioneer Your Life and Adrienne Thomas of She Rose and Shenanigans back here with you for the Art of Inquiry. This week's topic is surrender, that ever elusive, always asking for attention, necessary process that we all love to elude as long as possible. So today we're going to talk about how powerful, how necessary, how healing, how very critical this can be to finding more grace, more peace, more joy in our lives. So join us today as we sink into the topic of surrender. Adrienne, hello. How are you this week?
Good. This week's been long. I don't know. It's not been a bad week though. Like I personally haven't had any breakdowns per se, or things in my way. It's just kind of felt like a dragging feeling.
Yes, the sludge, I think you said. Days were feeling like weeks is one of those slow. Well, it is the springtime, when the seeds beneath the earth are beginning to emerge but aren't quite fully expressed yet. So that unearthing and that blooming period can feel, I think, quite restrictive for a lot of us. And though it is a natural cycle for all of us and a natural season, I think it can still be uncomfortable for a lot of us. So talking about surrender right now is great.
It is. It's like pushing through the shell of a seed. Like, oh, I'm going to grow already.
Yeah, indeed. And finding patience in the process, I think can drive the human mind to madness if we don't have tools for allowing and surrendering to the process that is at play.
Yeah.
So
speaking of that, that's been huge for me this week. Like that's constantly what I'm getting clarity on is be patient, be patient, be patient. And I'm kind of, today it kind of really hit where it's like I have been patient all week and I'm so frustrated with this patience thing. I'm ready,
Yeah. And such is life, that as much as we'd like to believe that we are the main and only captain of our ships.
Right.
We aren't, there's so much at play and so much interwoven energetics in terms of life and situational things going on, environmental things going on, global things going on, as well as our interpersonal relationships and just timing and flow in our lives in general, and this is, we also have to consider the factors and the timing at play with other situations. I've had myself this week has been kind of an intersection of very powerful acts of courage and bravery and things that I wouldn't say I was avoiding, but things that I've been trying to put off or kick down the road as long as possible. And I thought that's what I was doing, kicking the can. And what I really realized this last week was it was actually, I wasn't kicking the can for any reason other than it just wasn't time. It wasn't the optimal time for me to follow through with those actions. And so this last week when it finally came to fruition and a lot of these things emerged and things were set in motion, there were so many other things that clicked at the same time. And I'm like, here's that timing thing. Here's that just allowing for the process to occur and being diligent about doing the right steps in the meantime.
Right, and trusting the time of it all. Because that's how I am. I feel like I want to push it, but I'm like, no, I keep being reminded to just breathe and be patient. So and then it leaves that thing of I have to trust. In order to do that, I have to trust.
And I think trust and surrender in some ways, those can be synonymous in their action. Leaning and trust. I think that I just want to acknowledge that I think that can be a triggering word for people because it's such a loaded word on so many levels and people use it for so many different things, trust in relationships, trust in oneself, trust in timing. What is this whole trust thing about? And really, trust is about being at peace, and what we're talking about here and now. Trust is
Right.
being at peace with what is and how it is unfolding, recognizing, again, if we are in fact doing the best that we can do and we are showing up for life and the things that we want and the relationships that we want and the communications and, all of the things, and things aren't still moving or going the way that we need them to go or think we need them to go in that moment, trusting that, it all is flowing as it should. Because there's time and place for everything. And so on that topic, what would you say, because I think a lot of people, we threw out the word surrender, so our listeners are sitting here thinking whatever it is that they're thinking related to this topic. But for you, when someone says, Adrienne, just surrender, what comes to you? What is your experience with that?
Immediately would be resistance.
Right?
Yeah. That's immediately let go, surrender. It's ah! like resistance. And then after that, it's just breath. It's inhale and exhale and focus on the exhale.
So then I'm hearing that surrender is synonymous with letting go, the ability to let go.
That's how I feel, yes.
Yeah.
To release.
And so, to release. Okay. So when people are trying to learn the art of surrender, when people are really getting curious about what that actually means in their life, what that would look like. So, it's one thing to say, do this thing, but what are some of, aside from breath, because you obviously just acknowledged that, but what are the tools that we can offer our friends here today that allow for this process?
I can't remember. We actually haven't done a show in a little bit, so I can't remember if we did one on this, but I definitely think it needs to absolutely start with acceptance.
Yes, radical acceptance is my favorite term.
Have to start there. I'm here. I know I'm here. I'm feeling stuck. I'm facing a dilemma. I'm wanting to move. Whatever it is, you got to actually just be okay, here's what I know. I know I'm facing this. And then, and then we move forward from there.
I think, sorry, excuse me, not to cut you off, but when you say acceptance, I think that's such a critical thing for us to recognize as part of it, because there was, and this is historically speaking, so I'm going to speak in generalizations about myself and my life and the way I've been in relationship with it for many, many years. So one of my patterns has been magical thinking born of optimism, seeing the best in people, thinking, if I'm just really positive about the outcome, that things will work itself out. If I just, and this will segue into the conversation a little bit about spiritual bypassing that we'll get to in a minute. But, I think a lot of us have this desire to just kind of think our way out of situations instead of get to a place where we just accept that this is who we are working with, who we are in relationship with, who we are in business with. This is what is happening now. These are the situational, environmental factors. I've got X amount of dollars in my bank account. I've got these limitations on my schedule. I've got these players and children that I'm responsible for and devoted to, and really recognizing the realities that we face in that moment as we are taking on or approaching whatever it is that we are trying to make peace with or come to terms with or allow for. So acceptance is such a critical part before we move into anything, because you have to be able to be as real as possible about who and what and when and where and why.
Right. I think, though, that the thing that makes acceptance, I think, so hard is that we attach a lot of right and wrong and good and bad to it, rather than just it being that, you know what, this is just, it is what it is. This is where I'm at. There's that, this is where I'm at and it's not good. This is where I'm at and it's really bad, or it feels really wrong. Like, we're always applying meaning to the acceptance, and that's, I think, what makes acceptance sometimes so difficult.
Yeah, the storyline. Oh my gosh, the storyline. Well, I mean, I look back at different places in my life and in my business, and even relationships I've had, romantic, friendship, whatever. I mean, there's been a number of relationships where the storyline perpetuated the suffering in those spaces because I was so devoted to whatever way of thinking about it, or whatever, like you said, attachment I had to the experience. Well, they are this because of that. And if we just did, and it's like, no. Like, this isn't the time and place to elaborate. This is the time and place to just acknowledge,
that they are.
Yeah. Period. That they are, you are, we are. Even a simple practice can be with our schedules sometimes, this is exactly how much time we have in a day. And this is exactly how much real space I have to work with in my life to do this creative endeavor, to do my yoga practice, to do my art practice, to go take a walk with the dog, whatever it might be. But, being able to come to terms with what we're actually up against will allow for new pathways to open. Because if we can't get there, we're going to keep running on our hamster wheel because we can't quite identify our pathways forward when we're just telling the story of what was and what is, or what we think is.
Right. Yeah. It's funny that you just mentioned, something real quick about time, because I think that was, I kind of had a breakthrough this week with it because it went so slow that it was, I don't know what it was that made it go slow, but I'd be feeling like I was sitting, for hours working on something, and I'd look and it would have been like 45 minutes. And it was just kind of like, wow, like, what was it that I just now did in that created such incredible focus?
Yeah.
I feel like I got 3 hours of work done in 45 minutes, So that's on another little tangent, but it was kind of like, I think just accepting, that I needed to focus that hard kind of went, okay, well then you're going to be allotted, in a way, some more time with it, kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, I kept hearing presence as you were talking, just, presence of mind. And that's what acceptance allows for. And when we, ultimately this is all the pathway. These are all seeds of surrender, when we can get to a place where, we are present with the now, without, strip away all of the extra stuff and all of the fancy words and the fancy ideas and the systems that play in the beliefs and whatever, and it opens up it really opens up so much space in our lives when we can let these things go and we can detach from that a little bit. And that's a lot of times, where we have the epiphany or we have the aha, or we can go into those focused spaces and we can really create something remarkable, or we can find that time with ourselves that allows us to shift in the ways that we want to so we can show back up and whatever it is that we're trying to work through or that we're finding we're meeting a lot of limitations around. And so, surrendering to what is such an opportunity for opening and for new growth and insight to come in.
Yeah.
So I think, the reason we really wanted to talk about surrender, and our friends, I kind of feel like we need to tell you that we talked about this about 3 weeks ago. And Adrienne and I, twice, Adrienne and I had one of the most, for both of us, profound flows, and our conversation was just pinging back and forth, and just both of us were so energized at the end of it. We were like, oh my gosh, it was flowing so beautifully. I can't wait to share this with everybody because we felt really clear about what we were trying to express on the topic. And then we were so energized by it when we discovered that the recording didn't work, that we were like, you know what, let's just go, we're in this energy, let's do it again. And we did it again, and it was a pretty good, redo, and then it ended up being silent on the recording. So it actually recorded, but for some reason the sound didn't work. And so
you guys were not meant to receive it.
You were not meant to receive it. But it was such a practice in surrender for both of us at the end of it. The irony was just hilarious.
We had to let go.
Both like, oh my gosh, we have to completely. And it was days before I was making a huge cross-state line transition to a new environment and a new home in a different state for a while. And so it was, energetically like resistance at such a level that it would create incredible discomfort and sadness and angst. And so it was such a neat experience. So here we are again on the other side of that transition for me, and Adrienne's had some transitions as well. So, we're revisiting this topic because it's just,
we keep hitting it.
it's so critical. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
And, the art of surrender, I think, if nothing else, what we're really trying to leave you all with here today is a new way of thinking about it. And as Adrienne said when I first threw it out to her, resistance, because I think that we all have very organic resistance sometimes to letting go, to that illusion of control. We're so loyal to this idea that we really can manhandle life through thinking differently or pushing and imposing our will on someone or a situation or whatever it might be. But ultimately, what we're trying to offer here today is just a reminder that this can be such a pathway to, more peace, and to give you some tools that can allow for that to happen, because life is challenging. And yes, it's filled with joy. And yes, if you're on your purpose and you're driven and, you have your family and your loved ones around you and everything's aligned, awesome, but you're still going to hit roadblocks. You're still going to hit challenges. You're still going to suffer some days. You still are going to have hardships in your relationship with your children, with your career path, whatever it might be. So learning to really be in a place of radical acceptance and trusting the way things are flowing and the limitations that you're hitting and the roadblocks, and finding a way to find comfort and surrender in those moments so that you can actually move through with more grace and comfort, really.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that we need to move, it would be like just to kind of go through how I handle it personally. Then it's like, number one, it's like, okay, I do have to radically accept where I am. And then after that, I have to allow myself to be still and breathe and not add any judgment to the situation, and then observe. Because without being present to observation, I can't discern anything from there. Even if the surrender takes a few days, I still cannot discern anything. And that, I think, during that break or that waiting is when the spiritual bypassing happens. And I love that I do want to make sure that you hit on that today, because I love that you explained that to me a couple weeks ago, because I didn't have words for it. I knew it happened, but I didn't have words for it. Was, the need to collect light to actually cover up what's real.
Yeah.
So.
And I want to say something, expand on something you just brought up. So you said something about observation. And that just felt very timely, because my 10-year-old son and I were talking about this the other day. And, he made a comment that I felt sounded a little bit judgmental about a peer, or I don't remember exactly who it was, but I was like, whoa, kiddo, you've got to be really careful about the way you express that, because that could come across to someone else as being rude or intolerant or whatever, and I don't think that's what you're going for unless it is. And he said, no, Mom, I'm just being observant. And I said, well, let's talk about observation. And then we had this great little conversation. And then this morning, when I was doing my morning reading, I came across this quote that said, observation is evaluation observation without evaluation is the highest form of intelligence. There was a yoga guru, Krishnamurti, who said this, and I usually don't use that term guru, so that was kind of interesting that just flew in. Sometimes it gets attached to the word yoga.
Right.
But, I sent that meme to him this morning and said, this is exactly what we were talking about yesterday, how cool that it just popped up on my radar. But, I think being able to get to that place of where, again, we are just seeing it.
Right.
And when we talk about these things in action, because this is really what the core, the heart of what we are talking to you guys about today and offering you here are the tools to get there. Because it's one thing to say, accept, observe, blah, blah, blah. These are just terms. But what are the practices behind them that actually allow for successful observation and successful acceptance? And so,
because it is an act, it is an action. Surrendering is an action, and it's a constant action. It's, it's not something that's just, okay, I surrender right now. It's like, no, I'm currently surrendering, and as the now passes, I'm continuing to surrender, and as that now it's
absolutely,
it's a constant movement into it as the now moves.
Yeah. And, like going to the gym, these actions, these practices, they're all things that we strengthen through exercising them. I have been on a concerted effort to really open myself and take a look at my patterns and the ways that I continue to show up or recycle old wounds or old energy or generational stuff or whatever it might be that I'm looking at, or behaviors or avoidance or, whatever my core things are. I have been actively trying to peel back these layers in a focused, dedicated, let me see it. I am willing to look at it. I'm willing to receive feedback on it. I'm willing to be humble and eat my humble pie as often as I need to get through this in a way that it's no longer destructive to myself or others for over a decade. Over a decade, at least. And that's me, so, and the fact that, and this is something that's important to acknowledge because there's no time period for shedding. There's no time period for completion of healing or anything. And I think most of us would agree at this point in our lives that at some level it's foolish to think that there ever is full completion on any of this. Now, there are things that ultimately we can reflect on and be like, oh, I actually haven't shown up that way in years. That's awesome. Or I haven't had to worry about redirecting my thoughts in quite some time. That's amazing. I've really been able to create some new neural pathways. I've really been able to heal that trauma to the point that it's not a thorn in my way of responding and things like that. So, but I don't think that we ever fully reach a state of completion because there's always going to be new situations and dynamics that way.
Yeah, the triggers are there. It's just about whether or not they ping fast.
Yeah. Yeah. So actions then. So we're talking about some actions that can help. So why don't you start with just, talking about some of the action items or practices or ways that you move through things when you are really running up against resistance and limitation in your life.
Okay. Well, there's usually two things. One is that I literally clench everything. I squeeze every muscle I possibly can, and then I release it. The other one is that I ground. I go outside, and I just get as close to that dirt as possible. Lindsay, are you there?
I'm here. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. I was where did you go?
I'm laying on the ground with you.
That's pretty much what I when I know, okay, I know I'm in a funk, like even today, for instance, I knew I was in a funk. I wasn't sure what I was hitting, and like I said, I hadn't had any breakdowns to really apply meaning to it, but I knew that, okay, there's a bit of a funk here, and, you know, I need nature immediately.
Yeah.
And it didn't, and to be honest with you, I'm not even going to say that worked, right? Like I got up finally, you know, I spent an hour just relaxing in the grass, just completely flat on my back. But it didn't, I didn't walk away being like, oh yay, it's done and I feel great. You know, it was just kind of like the entry to, okay, I'm willing to just relax, just to let this go. You know, and then it was funny because after I did that, probably about 2 to 3 hours after that, and I've known, and the thing is that this week in particular, I've known I needed to cry. I have tried this week so hard to actually cry. Like I have been trying to force cry. I'm not kidding. Like I've been driving and, you know, like 2 tears come and I'm like, yes, we're about to cry. And it's like, nope, didn't happen. You know, or, I've been trying to watch sad movies to make myself cry. Like anything I could do to just be like, I have to release this tension.
Let it rip. Yeah.
And that was the thing is even when I went out, I was like, okay, yay, I'm going to go and I'm going to be on the grass and it's just going to flood. I'm going to make this come, and it still didn't come. and then about 2 to 3 hours later, it was kind of, you know, I just kind of went, look, I don't know what I'm hitting, but I obviously need some sort of guidance. So I just kind of reached out with a post to a group that I was in. I just went, I don't know what's going on this week, but I need to cry. And it was kind of like somebody just kind of went, okay, well then you're missing something. And it was like, oh yeah, what am I missing? And to be honest with you, it was actually that I was missing the acknowledgement of in a way, it was missing the acknowledgement of the fears that I have, but I wouldn't say it was fears. It wasn't necessarily
just
like
the feeling,
fears,
right?
Yeah. It wasn't
just
necessarily the fears of like what I'm doing. It was almost like I wasn't acknowledging that there is a part of me that's like, I don't even want to talk about this. I don't want to be responsible for talking about this. Mm-hmm. Like I wasn't acknowledging that there's that part of me that's like, I don't want to put myself out there like this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do, it's like, it's this driving thing where I do. I've put myself out there for 20 plus years. I just haven't put myself out there like in this form, us just even doing a podcast and then posting it completely publicly. It's always been this one-on-one, where I've put myself out there and I've helped people work through things one-on-one. And to put myself out there bigger, it was just like, I don't want to be responsible for it. I don't want to be held accountable for it. I don't want to have to show up to it. Like I just unleashed on this woman. And I just was like, I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want that. And I just started going. And then I got done and it was like, oh, thank you. Like I just needed to get that out. Now, did it mean that all of that is true? Right? Like, do I really not want it? No, because it's who I am. I'm not going to stop doing it regardless of whether I put it out there in a big way or a small way. It's not done for me.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of like, I just had to acknowledge that thing. It was like, I just don't want this, and you're putting so much energy toward it. I'm going to fight you. And I had to acknowledge the fact that I was fighting myself and be like, okay, you know what? I can listen. I can surrender to needing to hear that other side of myself.
Yeah.
And then I can relax and let it go and say, you know what? I hear you, and we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I think, this is an important thing to bring up is just within the vessel of acknowledgement. I mean, there's so many ways to do this. You can phone a friend. You can hit pad to paper. And a lot of times, what is on the surface is not usually, we may think we are totally in tune with exactly what it is, but usually it takes a little unraveling to get to the core, to that actual energy that we're sitting with. I woke up feeling like I was just overwhelmed with the energy of sadness and heaviness today too, interestingly enough. So I myself, same thing. I went for a drive in the mountains thinking you need to just let it rip, just let some tears fall. You've got a lot of heartache and a lot of sadness. Well, I did, but they didn't fall nearly as long or as much as I thought they needed to. I was ready for this,
like, don't. Yeah.
But it was just, I just needed a little bit to go. But what I really needed, sometimes it is, like I said, that phone a friend. Other times it's, to get silent. Sometimes speak it out. Sometimes get silent. Sometimes you need to hit pen to paper and write until you have nothing more to say, and then go back and read it, and you're like, holy cow, I didn't even know
where that come from. Right.
That was under there. Sometimes even just the process of art, scribbling on a piece of paper, doodling, sometimes hitting the ground, and so as we're talking about these action items and toolkit, things that you can add to your toolkit, I think it's important that you recognize, our friends who are listening today, that it's going to be completely situational, that there is no remedy that is going to work 100% of the time. Throughout, any fool who ever says that to you in your life or tries to tell you that their system is the system that's going to work for you, because that's bullshit. Rather recognize that the more things that you can add to your toolbox. So breathing, time in nature, grounding down in nature, squeezing all of your muscles, art, communication with another, writing on a piece of paper, meditation, taking a bath, whatever it might be.
Somehow getting it out of your body, which I think ultimately the quickest way to say that is share it. Whether it is on paper, whether it is in art, whether it is reaching out, it needs to come out. You have to share it. Whether you share it with nature, you share it with a song, it has to be shared.
Yeah, release.
Otherwise it cannot be, it can't be separate. It doesn't separate. It just sticks.
Yeah, it really does. And there's so many ways to do that. There are really just so many ways to allow yourself to be in a place of releasing, to move into surrender. And so I think giving yourself permission as an individual to just explore your toolkit whenever you need to. And if something's not really working, like today, I was reaching out to my loved ones when I was feeling heavy and thought that I needed to talk it out. But then when I started talking, I realized it was just making me feel more heavy. And I was also realizing I didn't have a lot of words. Even though I could hear the words and I could feel the words, I just couldn't quite express the words or articulate the words. And so I quickly was like, you know what, this is not where I need to be with this. This is not coming out. This is not how this needs to move right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and get off the phone. I love you. Thank you. I'll talk to you later. And then I went on to my next thing in my toolkit. And ultimately, and sometimes we have to do that. We have to try on a couple of our action items, practices, tools, before we get to the one that's like, there we go, that was my sweet spot. And sometimes it's just sticky for a while. Sometimes we just get to be in the energy of funk for a minute or two, or sometimes it's not something that can be resolved even if we let it go. We can get to where we've made peace with it and we've acknowledged it and we've accepted it. But we're still going to be with the energy of that emotion. And I think that's okay as well. But I think there's something that happens when you make that conscious detachment and you recognize this thing I'm going through right now is not me. It's not defining me. It is just an experience that I am witnessing right now. I'm observing this thing that is moving through my life right now. And yes, I have identified the roles that I play and all the things that I can or can't do with it. But ultimately, I need to just be witness to what's happening. To be the conscious observer of our lives. And that is a great pathway to surrender, to floating down the river on your back.
Now, let's talk real quick about collecting. Because I do want to make sure you hit on this again.
Collecting light. Tools. Collecting light.
Because like one of the big things out there are gratitude journals. I love gratitude journals. But again, without the accepting where you are, then gratitude journals sometimes can actually just cover it up. Like, oh, I'm fine. And then,
spiritual.
And then we'll cover it up and So do you have that definition again?
Yes. You keep talking about gratitude journals for a second. I'll get that for us here.
So that's a great tool. I love gratitude journals. I think that they're great. And of course, if you do them every day, then it starts to build that more and it keeps that rolling. But again, if the gratitude journal doesn't start with, here's where I am now, and even though I'm here now, I am still continuing to be thankful for this and that and that and that and that. Because sometimes when we're not acknowledging where we are, like I have seen a lot of gratitude journals where they're actually journals that are laid out for you in a manual form. And there isn't an acknowledgement of where you are now.
Yeah.
There's only, here, list 3 things you're thankful for today. And it's kind of like, wait a minute. Like, that's really great. I definitely want to list those things. But I have to acknowledge how I'm currently feeling.
Yeah.
I have to acknowledge where my reality currently is.
Yeah. So here I got this spiritual bypassing pulled up. So spiritual bypassing is a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. This term was introduced in the early 1980s by John Wellwood, a Buddhist teacher and psychotherapist. So, spiritual bypassing is this very thing. And I think there was a trend for about a decade there that really got into like the power of joy and, focusing on this thing. And not a bad thing. Again, not a bad thing, especially coming off the
I think it's
Prozac
still kind of
era,
Yeah, I think it's still kind of going on a little bit.
It is,
It is.
But
and
I
it's
think
kind of like, wait a minute, the light sits and rests on the dark.
And I think there's this whole misconception about light and dark being positive and negative and whatever. The yin yang was the core of my tree and my first business logo, Soul Inspired Wellness. It's about this balance, about this harmonizing. There's a time to be yin and there's a time to be yang. There's a time to be in light and a time to be in darkness, but it's not positive or negative. It's just a different perspective. When we're yang, we are, moving our energy outwardly. We are being very directional, and yang energy is actually very masculine. We've got a purpose and we're driven towards something and we're moving towards something and it's expressed. But the yang or yang energy is very feminine. It's the internal process. It's the womb. It's the darkness. It's the under the earth where the seed is gestating and it's rooting down and it's doing all the resting it needs to do in order to be fully expressed above the ground. This whole concept that, joy is light and the darkness is this heavy thing. And I think if anything, really, maybe this is the core of the conversation about surrender really is, what we really are doing is resisting the seasons and the cycles, right? So when life is asking us to be in this cycle of darkness, we aren't expressing, where we aren't outwardly emoting, where we're not creating something, where we're not in action, we're actually meant to be in rest. We're not supposed to be pushing through that energy. If you feel heavy and sad, acknowledge it and work through it. But maybe what you need that day is a day of rest. And a day of rest doesn't mean you're in your bed lying down napping. It can. We're not saying that. But maybe a day of rest looks like digging in the dirt or sitting down with your pen and paper and writing or doing that creative project or sewing or, doing some other thing that is nurturing and low energy for you, but that is not outwardly putting you out into the world in a way that you don't have the resource for right now.
Right. Well, and I think energy needs to be looked at almost honestly like paint. You have white paint and you have black paint, and then you have all these shades of gray. it's not, you don't use white when you're only painting good and black when you're only painting bad. You use it because it helps, it puts illusion on paper, and so that's the thing, is there is no good or bad to the energy. There's wisdom's located in the depths, and that's the thing, is that, with the yin and yang, it is, if we don't have the darkness, there's no way to see the light, right? So there has to be this darkness that's going to uphold the light. Then we collect all of this light. But once we've collected this light, we have to actually take the light into the darkness. We have to take it there. I mean, that's why in the yin and yang, especially, there is the dark circle up top, and there's the light circle, on the bottom within the dark. And that's the thing, is that if you had only light, if there was only light, you'd literally be an egotistical asshole, because you'd just be like, I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm this, I'm that, But so until the dark can get actually brought up in there, then there isn't light with compassion. And then once you have accumulated this compassionate light, you got to go and take it back into the dark and light up the dark and be like, what's in here? We have to surrender to this and really find out what's in here, And so that's the thing, is that or the dark, really what makes it bad, right? Why we call it bad is because it's actually made up of guilt and shame. And if we don't take that light down in there, like once the light gets taken in there, then the dark becomes full of forgiveness. But until we bring the light in and we explore all of that guilt and shame, we cannot bring about the full unit of the yin and yang and be whole with forgiveness and compassion, living in both worlds.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah. Surrendering really is just allowance, acceptance, trust, truth, being present with what is. And, this whole idea of balance can sometimes be overwhelming too. And I think I always preferred the term harmonizing, allowing your life to harmonize with the energies at play, and recognizing that, life is full spectrum. That's one of my favorite reminders to myself all the time. I'm like, Lindsay, life is full spectrum. There is no anything or anyone or any amount of money or friendship or career goals succeeded or whatever that is going to grant you immunity from the roller coaster that is life. It's just not. That's a grand illusion. And so the sooner we can give ourselves permission to just be in a place of reverent, joyful celebration of life in all its glory and color and dampening and darkening, but find ways to make peace with it, to surrender with what is, the more peace we're going to find. And for me, I think the greatest thing that has assisted me along the way, and we've got to wrap up here with everyone, but I think what I want to leave everyone with who's joining us here is that I got to a place where I gave myself full permission to not only be with what is, but to also be in a state of curiosity and that compassion, like Adrienne said, and just recognize that even if what I'm experiencing is bigger than me, or I don't know how to deal with it, or it's hurting me to my core, I adopted this perspective that life was not happening to me or because of me even, but that life was just it was constantly offering me an opportunity to grow into something more.
It's happening through you.
That's it. Yeah. And when I adopted that mindset that whatever it was I was experiencing was just an opportunity to be a more full expression of myself, to see more, to be more curious, to learn more about how I show up in the world, about who I am, about how I face my darkness and my light, and the dragons and demons, as well as the angels and lovers, It made it so much easier to go through, because it was less about protecting myself from these things or shaming myself or going through this guilt or whatever, and more about an empowered perspective on, what parts of me have not been tended to that allow me to rest here through this process. And so I think surrender to me really came, and again, it's a muscle that I have to regularly exercise, and sometimes it's not always super grateful, and sometimes I do want to resist, and I do want to say fuck you, and I do want to deny it, and I do want to run away from it until I have enough strength and energy to come back and actually face it and be curious. But ultimately, when I got to the point that I fundamentally believed that life was a gift that I was being offered, and that I had the opportunity with whatever it was that I was facing, that if I let go and just experienced it and acknowledged it and trusted, because I could look back on enough experiences to see that, in fact, we do survive most things, and I am a much more
we survive everything but death.
Yeah.
Everything but death.
Everything.
Yeah.
So, that reminder that when I look back behind me in the rearview mirror occasionally, I'm like, oh, that Lindsay 10 years ago, and that Lindsay 5 years ago, and even that Lindsay 3 years ago, she wasn't nearly as full and soft and open as I just continue to become. But It is a conscious choice, choosing to surrender to life and being at, I don't even want to use the word peace because that can in some ways be flippant about the experience that we have, but choosing to be in a place of acceptance, radical acceptance around what it is we're facing and what we're experiencing, really does, like we said earlier, open up that opportunity for us to have our best life.
Yeah. I do want to jump in with what you said real quick about full spectrum, because I think that is so important that we really just nail that one in, is that regardless of the curiosity, regardless of extending your depth or being willing to surrender or whatever, the practice of doing these things, of actually taking things on, doesn't mean that you get to a point where you're not going to experience emotion. No matter how big of a guru anybody is, they still experience the emotion. It's just whether or not it plays through their body fast enough for them to be with it.
Well, and whether, we can be in our safe and sound center, and we can
that's what I mean. Yeah. They can be with it rather than fight it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it doesn't get experienced. It's there. It just is how quickly can you surrender to it? How quickly can you be with it and allow it just to be, just as it is, to accept as it is, And the more tools you have, the quicker you get at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, friends, basically, we love you. Everyone's on the path. There's no right time. There's no wrong time. There's no place that you can't course correct from or you turn out of or slide up and down, whatever direction, that it is possible to move through. It is possible to learn and grow. It is possible to heal beyond shame. It is possible to break patterns of projection and rejection and whatever things may be at play, whatever patterns, defense mechanisms, trauma-based responses may be at play, to open up life in a different way for you. And so today, we just want to leave you with that reminder that you have the ability, if you so desire, and you may need a great support. You do need a great support system.
Everyone needs a pit crew.
Yes, that blessed, beautiful pit crew. So facing whatever it is that you're facing, it begins with really acknowledging all these things. Find your pathway to that and recognize that you have so many outlets all the time. And if you get to a place where you ever don't know where to go, I'd say the easiest thing to do is either hit pen to paper, find a breath in your chest, or phone a loved one. And by loved one, we mean someone who's actually going to be with you just to listen and hear you, not to fix you, not to shame you, not to jump into story, not to perpetuate situations. But find those sacred, I call them my sacred counsel. I have people in my life who I know no matter what I'm about to bring them, they can sit there without judgment, without getting into the storyline with it, without needing to fix something, but to be just curious as witness, and then asking me what I need from there.
Yeah.
Find those people who can help get you through this, because surrender is going to be your most rapid pathway to grace on a daily basis in your life. Really being able to figure out how to let go in a way that doesn't stifle your ability to be free in ways that you really desire to be free.
Yeah. And if you don't have that sacred counsel, then we're here.
Absolutely.
Just want to offer that.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us again for this episode of Art of Inquiry as we explore the topic of surrender. We will be back with you all very soon. As always, feel free to join us over on the She Rose and Shenanigans page on Facebook. You can find me at Lindsay James. And we'd love to continue the conversation and explore life, and wish you all the best as you enjoy the unfolding.
Yes. And I'd like to throw out my other new page real quick too. You can find me at Adrienne L. Thomas, and both of us at She Rose and Shenanigans.